How does that sit with you?
Well, what exactly are you talking about, Whoopi? Because you just
I know
Emmett Till was.
Wait, stop scrolling. You're about to see what happens when a live television ambush completely backfires. Look at how he flips the entire room with just one single sentence.
No, I want to know what she's.
You don't know what I'm talking
to your
about.
actual point.
So in a lot of the.
Wait, did you catch that? Look closely at the body language right there. For the last 10 years, political media has relied on a very specific strategy. Throw a massive, emotionally charged accusation at a guest and watch them instantly scramble to apologize or backpedal. It is a formula designed to create sound bites, not actual conversations. But right here, the script completely flips. By simply remaining calm and asking for one specific example, he completely derails the entire pressure tactic. Notice how the panel instantly fractures? They are not used to a guest demanding accountability for the premise of the question itself. It forces the interviewer to suddenly defend their own accusation in real time, and they clearly don't have the receipts ready. It is a masterclass in frame control. Instead of taking the bait and fighting on their chosen battlefield, he calmly requests the evidence, which totally deflates the emotional momentum in the room. You rarely see this level of composure under studio lights, and it exposes exactly how reliant modern interviews are on pure emotion rather than hard facts.
My view, I'm sure you guys don't agree with it, is that we inherited a mess and we're fixing it. But sometimes it takes a long time to fix a mess.
Sonny.
Okay. You were the leading voice behind the scenes to release the Epstein files, and we applaud you for that. The report says you even floated having Tucker Carlson interview Ghislaine Maxwell to clear the president's name, but you were rebuffed by your people.
Don't believe everything that you read in any newspaper. I am, frankly, kind of a conspiracy theory on the Epstein stuff. And that story says that that's one of the things that's true, is that some people called me a conspiracy theory on the Epstein
Susie
stuff.
Wiles called you a conspiracy
and I love
theorist.
Susie, but absolutely, she thinks I'm a conspiracy theorist on the Epstein stuff because I think that it's crazy that you had this guy who is clearly a sex predator who is hanging out with a lot of very wealthy and powerful people. Like, that really bothered me. I don't know what's there. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, the one that the president signed, the one that led to all these files that we're seeing, the emails. By the way, again, sorry, Joe, I do have to defend my boss. I know you guys don't always appreciate this, but, you know, one of the things you see in the Epstein emails is that Jeffrey Epstein hated Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump, he reported him to the police. That's what I'm saying. That is objective. That is objectively true. But Anna made another point that I think, Whoopi, if I may, because Anna made a very important point. This question about, did Donald Trump release these files only under duress from Republicans? And Anna, you know the Republican Party probably better than I do. The idea that Donald Trump runs around afraid of Republican congressmen as opposed to the other way around is kind of crazy.
What was the bipartisan? It was Republicans and Democrats.
But because the Republicans control the House and the Senate, particularly the Senate, you need the Republican sign-off. What the president did is, look, I will say this. Again, I was in there in the meetings. He was very frustrated that the Democrats were making this about him when he's like, look, I threw the guy out of my club. I am the guy who reported him to the police, or one of the people who reported him to the police. The president was frustrated about that, absolutely. But he eventually came to say, you know what, let's just get everything out there. Let's have this out in the public. And he actually called the senators. I was there. He called the senators and said, you know what, pass this bill, I'll sign it. And that.
Are you seeing what just happened here? This is the classic guilt by association trap, and it is usually a nightmare to navigate on live television. The second someone brings up a radioactive name, the natural human instinct is to get highly defensive, raise your voice, or completely dodge the topic. But look at his posture. He doesn't lean back, he doesn't cross his arms, and he certainly doesn't dodge. He leans right in and drops an objective, verifiable piece of data that completely neutralizes the attack. By pointing out that the individual in question actually hated the person they are trying to tie him to and bringing up the police report, he totally short-circuits the ambush. Watch the faces on the panel right after he says that. The air gets completely sucked out of the room because you simply cannot argue with a filed police report. He took their absolute strongest, most controversial talking point and handled it like he was casually discussing the weather. This is what high-level media training looks like when it meets genuine confidence.
One of the most democratic and one of the blackest, by share of population, blackest cities in the United States of America has seen a radical decrease in violent crimes and sexual assaults and in murders. We have tried to take the crime issue seriously, in part because we believe everybody, whether you're black or white or rich or poor, deserves to live in a safe neighborhood.
Why does the crime? Where does the crime step in? This is not about crime. This is
black women
about
lost their jobs.
Right. This is about human
Sonny,
rights.
what you're saying is
Black
we got to do more on the economy.
Black history has been
Sonny,
erased from public
Black
spaces.
history is not
That
erased
is
from
true.
public
Guys,
spaces.
we do
That
have to
is
get to
not
Iran
right.
when we get back.
Yeah,
There's some very
guys,
important news to
I'm
get
telling
to.
you, we celebrate Black history. We celebrate all American history in this administration.
can I
You
ask you
guys
about a
might be
specific
skeptical of this, but I promise you it's true.
Look at the dynamic shifting right in this moment. The panel originally wanted to box him into a corner about policies and ideologies, framing the topic to spark outrage. But instead of playing defense, he instantly pivots the conversation to tangible, real-world outcomes, public safety and crime rates in major cities. This is a brilliant rhetorical pivot. By bringing up Washington, D.C. and focusing on violent crime reduction, he takes a highly polarized topic and grounds it in something universally relatable, the basic right to live in a safe neighborhood. Notice how the panel starts trying to talk over him and change the subject. That is the exact moment they realize they are losing control of the narrative. When you shift an argument from subjective feelings to objective public safety metrics, it becomes nearly impossible to argue against without sounding completely unreasonable. He is calmly building a coalition right at their desk, framing his stance as common sense protection for everyone, regardless of background. It is surgical, highly effective, and leaves the panel completely stranded.
You guys might be skeptical of this, but I promise you it's true.
I have to go to break. Anna, God, please, we have more with Vice President J.D. Vance when we come back. Don't do that.
Okay, pause for a second and just watch the producer mechanics unfolding in real time. We call this the eject button. When a live segment starts spiraling out of the host's control and the guest is actually winning over the room, you will inevitably hear that magic music cue. The timing here is absolutely not a coincidence. Right as he is gaining undeniable momentum and the panel is actively running out of counter-arguments, they suddenly have to go to a commercial break. The urgency in her voice tells you everything you need to know about what is happening in their earpieces. Control room producers are likely panicking, realizing that the viral moment they wanted is actively backfiring on them. Cutting to break is the ultimate white flag in broadcasting. It is the only way to reset the board when your team is losing badly. It is almost comical how perfectly timed it is. When facts start making people visibly uncomfortable on a highly produced set, the commercial break is always wearing a cape, coming to the rescue.
In order for us to actually enforce the law, you can't set a standard that says you're not allowed to deport anyone unless they've committed a violent crime. You've got to enforce the law equally and justly.
Let me do my...
Listen closely to the distinction he just made because it completely dismantles the emotional trap they set for him. They are trying to argue that deportations are inherently cruel, pushing for a narrative that only the absolute worst offenders should face any consequences. But notice how he completely sidesteps the emotional bait and focuses purely on the structural integrity of the law. He points out that you simply cannot run a functioning legal system if you create a massive loophole that grants immunity to people who break the law, just because the crime wasn't violent. It is a brilliant way of forcing the conversation back to basic logic and fairness. If you only enforce laws against the absolute worst criminals, you essentially don't have a border policy at all. By framing it as an issue of equal enforcement rather than a targeted punishment, he makes it completely unreasonable for the panel to argue against him without sounding like they are advocating for selective justice. It is calm, measured, and totally impossible to corner. Check out how he handles one of the trickiest political maneuvers in the book, the religious guilt trip. The panel attempts to weaponize his own Catholic faith against him, implying that enforcing a border is somehow a violation of Christian charity. Most politicians would immediately start sweating and offer some watered-down apology or vague philosophical answer. Instead, he faces it head-on with pure clinical logic. He perfectly separates the spiritual duty of compassion from the civil duty of law enforcement. He acknowledges that enforcing the law isn't always pretty, which is a surprisingly honest admission that totally deflates the panel's attempt to paint him as heartless. By comparing immigration enforcement to regular police work, he grounds the entire argument in common sense. If a law is broken, a law enforcement officer has to show up. It is that simple. He strips all the performative outrage away and brings the discussion back to the absolute basics of how a functioning society has to operate. It completely neutralizes the emotional ambush before it even gets off the ground. Hit subscribe if you love seeing the raw truth decoded, and drop a comment below on who you think actually won this debate.